when Yu Menglong's lifeless body was found after a fall from a Beijing luxury tower, police wasted no time labeling it an accident caused by alcohol. Case closed, but almost instantly, whispers spread online that something far more sinister had happened. Anonymous posts claimed the autopsy revealed details that didn't match a fall at all. Injuries that suggested torture, wounds too deliberate, and even a stomach cut open as if someone had been searching for something hidden inside. Was Yu already dead before his body ever left the balcony? And if so, who staged his fall, and why? A mysterious farewell letter, a vanishing peephole video, and censorship that moved faster than truth itself only deepened suspicion. Tonight on Criminal Tracks, we uncover the chilling theory that Yu Menglong's death was never an accident, but a cover-up too big to confess. Subscribe now, because the silence speaks louder than words. The morning of September 11th, 2025, began with shock. News spread quickly across Chinese social media that Yu Menglong had died in Beijing after a fatal fall from the Sunshine Upper East residential complex. Police issued a swift statement saying the young actor had been drinking heavily and lost his balance. They called it a tragic accident, one of those sudden ends that could happen to anyone. But for many of his fans, and soon for a much wider public, that explanation did not feel complete. Something about the speed of the official response, the neatness of the story, seemed staged. Within hours, speculation began to bloom in the spaces where grief and suspicion collide. The first ripple of doubt came from those who pointed out Yu's career and his recent silence in the industry. He had not been seen at public events for months. Rumors of stress and isolation had already been swirling before his death. People began asking how a man who was already struggling privately could have wound up dead so suddenly, and why officials were so quick to point to alcohol alone. By the end of the day, one of the most chilling claims began to surface: that Yu might not have been alive at the time of the fall. Anonymous accounts claimed that someone in the emergency response team had noticed irregularities with Yu's body. According to these whispers, his injuries did not match the impact of a high fall. Instead, they spoke of wounds that looked older, inflicted before he ever reached the ground. The most shocking detail was a claim that his stomach had been cut open, as if someone had searched for something hidden inside. Almost immediately, this tied into earlier gossip about a mysterious USB drive, said to contain evidence of money laundering or powerful names. Suddenly, the idea that Yu's death was an accident seemed far less believable to those desperate for answers. The rumor of an autopsy leak quickly took on a life of its own. Posts circulated claiming the medical team had seen signs of internal bleeding, inconsistent with a fall, along with injuries that suggested torture. These posts were rarely sourced, but they spread with frightening speed. Screenshots appeared of supposed autopsy notes, written in clinical language but riddled with gaps. For believers, these scraps were proof that Yu had been dead before he was ever pushed or dropped from the balcony. For skeptics, they were simply the invention of grief-stricken fans, unwilling to face the possibility that their idol had died tragically by chance. In this feverish environment, every small detail took on exaggerated importance. The alleged farewell letter Yu had written gained new weight. His words about footsteps outside his door, shadows pressing in, and suffocating despair were no longer just expressions of fear. To many, they were warnings from a man who already knew his death had been arranged. Why else would he describe his life as being toyed with, his soul humiliated, if not because something was happening behind the scenes? Fans began piecing these words together with the alleged autopsy leaks. To them, the picture was clear. Yu had been captured, tortured, possibly even killed, and his body staged to look like a drunken fall. The peephole video added even more fire to the growing theory. Said to show Yu escorted by several men, with a woman following behind, holding a phone, it became a symbol of his final hours. When netizens pointed out that the strap on the woman's phone resembled one used by actress Irene Song, suspicion hardened into narrative. If Yu had already been hurt before the fall, then this video became the last glimpse of him alive, a prisoner rather than a man stumbling home drunk. The idea that he was dragged down that hallway before meeting a staged death fit perfectly with the theory that the autopsy revealed the truth. Yu was dead before he fell. By September 12th and 13th, the whispers had become a storm. Online forums buzzed with elaborate explanations. Some argued that Yu had hidden the USB drive in his own body to keep it safe, and that the stomach wound was proof of someone cutting it out. Others said he had been beaten to extract confessions and killed when he refused to give in. Even the speed of the official accident ruling became suspicious, as if it were meant to prevent a deeper investigation that might reveal uncomfortable evidence. At this point, the rumor of the autopsy was no longer just about medical facts. It had become a metaphor for the entire case. To those who believed, it symbolized everything the authorities wanted hidden, the truth cut open and then quickly sewn shut again. The details may have been uncertain, but the message was not. Yu Menglong's death could not have been an accident because too many details pointed to something darker. Whether it was the letter, the video, the stomach wound, or the USB drive, all of it painted the same story. In those first days after his death, grief turned into conviction. Fans did not just mourn their idol. They fought to prove that his final hours were not the result of bad luck or drunkenness. They believed he had been silenced, killed before the fall, and left behind as a warning to anyone who dared to resist the same powers. It was a chilling thought, one that made the official narrative feel hollow. And as the days stretched on, the theory of the autopsy showing Yu was dead before he fell would only grow, feeding on silence, censorship, and unanswered questions. By September 14th, the storm around Yu Menglong's death had shifted from quiet speculation to a full-blown battle of narratives. The accident explanation put forward by police was being repeated on state outlets. But online, it was the whispers of something darker that spread faster. The theory that Yu was already dead before he hit the ground became the centerpiece of the debate. A theory that touched on everything fans believed they saw in the days before his final fall. Commentators began revisiting Yu's behavior in the weeks leading up to September 11th. They pointed to his absence from public life, his strangely downcast appearance in the few photos that surfaced, and his quiet withdrawal from projects that once defined him. Instead of being dismissed as signs of exhaustion, these clues were reinterpreted as evidence that he had been under immense pressure, that he had already sensed the trap closing in around him. His farewell letter, whether authentic or fabricated, became the linchpin of this interpretation. Words like footsteps, suffocating despair, and "they will silence me" were now taken as signs he anticipated not just a fall, but a killing masked as one. The theory gained more strength when people began to examine how quickly the authorities ruled out foul play. In most cases, death investigations take time. Autopsies are detailed, interviews are conducted, and the results are only shared after days of scrutiny. Yet in Yu's case, officials declared within hours that it was an accident caused by alcohol. For many, this was the most suspicious detail of all. If the story was truly that simple, why rush to close it? Why not let a thorough investigation play out? To skeptics, the speed itself was proof that there was something to hide. September 15th brought another wave of speculation when anonymous online posts claimed to have knowledge of the autopsy itself. These posts described injuries that seemed inconsistent with a fall from a tall building. They mentioned bruises on his arms and torso, marks that looked more like restraints than the chaotic injuries of impact. One particularly shocking detail described his stomach as having been cut open before the fall, echoing earlier rumors that he had hidden a USB drive inside his body to protect evidence of corruption. No one could prove these posts were true, but they spread with lightning speed. To those already convinced, they offered the missing piece. Yu had been tortured, possibly killed, and then staged to look like a careless accident. This narrative gained further momentum as netizens linked it to other elements of the case. The peephole video, though blurry and fragmentary, suddenly took on new meaning. Instead of seeing Yu alive and walking, conspiracy theorists insisted he looked subdued, maybe even drugged, escorted like a captive rather than moving under his own will. The presence of the woman trailing behind, allegedly holding a phone with a recognizable strap, added to the suspicion. If Yu had already been injured, her role was not that of a witness, but of a handler, recording the process to ensure obedience. The video, paired with the alleged autopsy details, became a cornerstone of the claim that Yu was dead, or as good as dead, before his body left the balcony. On September 16th, Yu's mother stepped forward with her own statement, echoing the official line that alcohol was the cause. While meant to calm the situation, her words only deepened suspicion. Fans said the statement did not sound like a grieving mother, but like a document carefully written under watch. Why would she emphasize alcohol and refuse to acknowledge the swirling rumors, unless she herself was under pressure? In the court of public opinion, this became another brick in the wall of doubt. Her silence on the farewell letter and the video was read not as avoidance, but as confirmation that she could not speak freely. By September 17th, commentators had begun to expand the theory beyond Yu himself. They argued that his death was not just about one actor, but about the larger machinery of the entertainment industry. According to this view, Yu had resisted participating in hidden transactions, money laundering schemes, and humiliating arrangements that others complied with. His refusal made him a liability, and his death served as both punishment and warning. The alleged autopsy leaks were woven into this story. His body showed signs of torture because he had resisted, and his stomach had been cut open because he had concealed evidence. In this version of events, his fall was not the cause of death, but the final cover, a theatrical ending meant to disguise the truth. On September 18th, the story grew even darker when anonymous sources online claimed that Yu had been dead for hours before his body was discovered. They argued that the fall occurred later, after preparations were made to stage the scene. These sources pointed to the timing of the first emergency calls, suggesting there were gaps that could not be explained by a simple accident. If Yu was dead before the fall, they said, then the entire timeline presented by authorities was false. Meanwhile, Beijing police stayed silent about these rumors, addressing none of them directly. That silence, in the eyes of many, was not neutrality, but complicity. If the autopsy truly showed nothing unusual, why not release it? Why not let the public see the report for themselves? The lack of transparency only hardened belief in the conspiracy. Each unanswered question became another reason to doubt. By September 19th, the theory had gone international. English translations of the alleged farewell letter and autopsy details appeared on overseas platforms. Foreign commentators picked up on the story, presenting it as an example of how truth and fiction blur under censorship. To international audiences, the idea that Yu might have been dead before the fall seemed plausible, especially when paired with the rapid cleanup of online content in China. The global spread of the rumor made it harder for authorities to contain, and the question of the autopsy's findings became the focal point of the debate. On September 20th, conspiracy theorists doubled down by linking Yu's case to other suspicious celebrity deaths in China. They pointed out similarities with past cases where official explanations were offered quickly, while whispers of foul play lingered for years. Yu's name was added to a growing list of stars who, according to believers, had been silenced when they refused to play along with hidden systems of power. His death, and the theory of the autopsy showing prior death, was presented as part of a pattern rather than an isolated event. By the time September 21st arrived, the narrative had crystallized into two competing truths. The authorities insisted Yu died in an accidental fall while intoxicated. The public, or at least a large portion of it, insisted the autopsy showed otherwise. They believed he had been tortured, killed, and then thrown or staged to appear as if he had fallen. In this version, the fall was not the tragedy, but the disguise, a mask meant to hide the real crime. The tragedy of Yu Menglong's death became bigger than the man himself. It became a battlefield between those who trusted the official narrative and those who refused to believe it. The alleged autopsy leaks, the farewell letter, the video, the rushed police response, all of it combined into a story too large to contain. Whether true or not, the idea that Yu was dead before the fall became one of the most enduring and chilling theories of his final hours. A theory that would haunt his legacy long after the case was declared closed. When the police declared on September 21st that Yu Menglong's case was closed, they likely expected the public storm to fade. Instead, their verdict became the spark for another wave of debate, one that cut deeper than before. The official conclusion was simple. Yu had been drinking. He lost his balance, and the fall killed him. But for many, that explanation no longer mattered. By then, the belief that he was already dead before his body struck the ground had taken on a life of its own, fueled by silence, censorship, and the absence of clear answers. From that moment, two versions of reality began running side by side. The first was the official record, no evidence of torture, no tampering, no signs of foul play. The second was the people's version. Yu had been tortured, possibly murdered, and his fall was a carefully staged performance. Every piece of news was interpreted differently, depending on which side one stood. When authorities announced that several netizens were under coercive measures for spreading falsehoods, some saw it as proof the government was defending the truth. Others saw it as confirmation that dangerous details were being buried. The theory of Yu being dead before the fall evolved into something larger than forensic details. It became symbolic of mistrust, a lens through which people interpreted every action that followed. When tributes from fellow celebrities avoided addressing the rumors, it was seen as silence born of fear. When Irene Song stayed quiet, her absence was read as guilt, her lawyers' threats as intimidation. Each move was absorbed into the narrative that the truth was too dangerous to say out loud. Internationally, the story only deepened. Without the heavy censorship found in China, platforms abroad allowed the rumors to spread unchecked. Translations of Yu's alleged farewell note were shared widely, often paired with the claim that the autopsy showed inconsistencies. The combination of heartfelt words and chilling medical details gave the theory a kind of emotional authenticity. For audiences overseas, it became easy to believe that Yu had been silenced, and that his fall was nothing more than a disguise. By late September, the phrase "dead before the fall" was no longer just a rumor, but a rallying cry. It captured both the suspicion and the grief of those who felt robbed not only of an actor they admired, but of the truth about his death. Even if no evidence ever emerged to prove the theory, its power lay in what it represented: a refusal to accept a story that felt too clean, too quick, and too controlled. In the end, Yu Menglong's tragedy split into two verdicts. The state's verdict insisted he died by accident. The people's verdict insisted he was silenced. And between those two truths, his legacy became something far more haunting. The story of a man who, in death, became the symbol of questions that may never be answered. The official verdict says Yu Menglong fell while drunk, nothing more. But the rumors refused to die. His alleged farewell note, the mysterious injuries, and the whispers of an autopsy leak leave behind a chilling question. Was he already gone before he hit the ground? For fans, the truth lies buried beneath silence and censorship. Whether he died by accident or was silenced by design, Yu's story will not be forgotten. For more untold stories where tragedy collides with mystery, subscribe to Criminal Tracks. Because some accidents are far too convenient to believe.